Welcome to part 2. In this part, we're going to be talking about repeated factors. So the factorized cubic, if the factorized cubic has a repeated factor and another linear factor, there are only two x-axis intercepts, and the repeated factor corresponds to one of the turning points. So let's see what this means. We're going to roughly sketch each of the following, labeling only the x-intercepts. So if we come here, you can see, as the definition said here, we have one linear factor, and then this one right here, this is a repeated factor because it's squared. So this one right here is our repeated factor because it's squared. Now, we can begin by just figuring out what our x-intercepts are first. So our x-intercepts are going to be -2 and +3. Then, because this is repeated, it's a repeated factor, what that means is 3 here, this 3 is going to bounce. That's the way I like to think about it. This 3 is going to bounce because it's a repeated factor. And what do I mean by bouncing? Well, if I was to come here and just put in my points, I have one at -2 and one at 3. If I was to now give this a sketch, because it's positive, I know it's going to go up, and then it's going to bounce there. Now let's see if I can draw that a bit straighter, but as you can see, I went up and then I bounce. So I bounced at the repeated factor. So this one right here was -2, 0, and this one was 3, 0. And it bounced at 3, 0 because it's a repeated factor. So as you can see here, this one right here is my repeated factor. So what that means, it's going to bounce at 1. This is my repeated factor. My x-intercepts are going to be 1 and 3. And that means that this 1 here is going to bounce. Again, we can see what this means. I'm going to have 1 here and 1 at 3. So when I draw this now, remember, because it's positive, I'm going to go up. It's going to bounce. Whoop, that's ugly. Let's try again. It's going to go up. It's going to bounce. And then it's going to go like that. So it's going to look something like that. But as you can see, because it's positive, I'm starting by going up. But then as soon as I get to that 1, it bounces there. So repeated factors bounce. So this is going to be 1, 0. This is going to be 3, 0. Let's come to the next one here. You can see immediately what we have to be aware of here. There's a couple of things we have to be aware of. My eye first goes to the fact that we have a reflection going on. Then we have a repeated factor as well that we have to keep an eye on. So you can see how you have to be very aware of what's going on here. So that means our x-intercept is going to be 4 and -2. Okay, 4 and -2. So now I'm going to have 1 at -2. I'm going to have 1 at 4. It's negative, so I'm going to go down. Now, it's going to bounce at -2, so it's going to bounce here. So it's going to go down. It's going to bounce, and then it's going to go like that. Try to draw yours straight. Or smooth, rather. Like that. Perfect. So that's generally what it's going to look like. Again, mine aren't the prettiest graphs in the world. So this is going to be -2, 0. This is going to be 4, 0. And again, this one bounced because it's a repeated factor. See if you can pause the video and do this one for yourself. First thing you should notice is that this tells me that it's going to be reflected. And the reason for that is because I've got a -x. So that means if I were to expand this, what I would end up with is -x², which tells me it's going to be reflected. Okay, then we have to also identify what our x-intercepts are going to be. Or actually, let me say that this too is a repeated factor. Repeated factor. So that means my x-intercepts are going to be 5 from this one, and then -3 from over here. So -3, 5. So it's going to look similar to the other one. It's going to start off by going down, then up, then down. So that is what my graph is going to look like. And let me just quickly put in my X-Intercepts. So it's going to be -3, 0, and 5, 0. Again, let me stress that in the exercise, they will ask you to draw sign diagrams, but you do not need to draw sign diagrams. Okay, I'll stop here and then I'll go to part 3 in the next video. Hopefully this made sense, and I'll see you soon.